Have you ever just stopped and wondered how your favorite video game looks so incredibly real? Or how AI can whip up these stunning, one-of-a-kind images out of thin air? Well, the magic behind all of that is the graphics processing unit, or GPU. What started as a pretty simple chip just for drawing text on a screen has morphed into an absolute powerhouse. It's driving everything from blockbuster games to massive breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. So let's dive into its incredible journey.
We're going to break this story down into 6 parts. We'll start in a world of just simple text, and then watch the chaotic, exciting birth of 3D graphics. We'll see the moment developers finally got creative control, how the GPU broke out of its gaming-only shell, and finally, how it's now simulating reality itself, totally reshaping the future of computing as we know it.
All right, let's rewind the clock all the way back to the early 1980s. Back then, calling something a graphics card was, well, it was being pretty generous, especially when some of them couldn't even draw a basic picture.
So back in 1981, you had a choice. On one hand, you had the monochrome display adapter, the MDA. It gave you super sharp, easy-to-read text, which was perfect for business stuff. But if you wanted color, you had to make a big sacrifice. The color graphics adapter, or CGA, could give you 16 whole colors, which was amazing at the time, but your text looked like a blurry mess. That was the trade-off. It was our very first step from a world of clean text into a world of blocky, colorful graphics.
The 80s were just this whirlwind of progress. You got the Enhanced Graphics Adapter, EGA, in '84, which gave us more colors to play with. But the real game changer, that was VGA in 1987. By switching over to an analog signal, it unlocked over 250,000 colors. All of a sudden, computers could show images with actual depth and nuance. This move literally paved the way for the graphical user interfaces that we all still use every single day.
Then came the 90s, and man, everything changed. Games like Doom and Quake weren't just about moving pixels around anymore. They were about creating these immersive 3D worlds. And that created this just insatiable hunger for hardware that could render these worlds in real time. This is what kicked off the fierce competition that we now call the 3D accelerator war.
So in the mid-90s, companies like ATI, S3, and Matrox started tacking on some basic 3D features to their regular 2D cards. Now these weren't super powerful, but they were essentially free with the card you were already buying, which is how they got the nickname Freedy. This was the first time everyday people could actually experience 3D graphics, and it just created this huge appetite for more.
This table really captures the absolute chaos of the mid-90s market. You had the legendary 3D Effects Voodoo, which was a specialized 3D-only card. It was the undisputed king for high-performance gaming, no question. Then you had ATI, who was just dominating the mainstream market with their affordable Freedy cards. And then you had this newcomer, NVIDIA, with its Riva 128. It was an all-in-one card that, well, was about to change the game forever. Okay, this is a huge moment. In 1999, NVIDIA releases the GeForce 256, and they don't just launch a new product, they basically create a whole new category. They built specialized hardware for something called transform and lighting, which is just the intense math that figures out where stuff is in a 3D world and how light hits it. By putting that on the card, they freed up the main CPU to focus on other things like game logic and AI. They called this new processor a GPU, and that name definitely stuck.
And check this out. This chart shows that shift perfectly. See over here, in 1996, the CPU is doing almost all the heavy lifting for the geometry. But just fast forward to 1999 and boom, the GPU's column has completely taken over transform and lighting. The graphics card wasn't just drawing pictures anymore, it was becoming a powerful coprocessor, a true partner to the CPU.
Now, that fixed pipeline was fast for sure, but it was rigid. It was kind of like an assembly line that could only build one single model of a car, over and over again. For the next big leap in how good things looked, developers needed freedom. They needed to design the car themselves. They needed control. Yeah, before 2001, a GPU was pretty much a black box, a fixed function pipeline. Developers could feed data in one end, and the hardware would process it through a bunch of rigid, unchangeable stages. They could use the tools the hardware gave them, but they couldn't change the tools themselves. And then shaders came along and changed absolutely everything. A shader is just a little program that a developer writes and sends directly to the GPU. So instead of being stuck with boring built-in effects, they can now program exactly how 3D points were positioned and how every single pixel was colored. This gave them this incredible artistic control, letting them create all these complex visual effects that were just impossible before.
The NVIDIA GeForce 3, which came out in 2001, was the first GPU to have a programmable pipeline. As you can see in this diagram, developers could now just inject their own custom shader programs right into the rendering process. This just unleashed a massive wave of creativity, and the entire look and feel of video games was changed forever. So this new programmability was a game changer for graphics, no doubt. But it also had this fascinating unintended consequence. In the mid-2000s, a huge architectural shift would give the GPU a totally new purpose, one that would end up setting the stage for the AI revolution.
The really big change was something called the unified shader architecture, which NVIDIA introduced with their GeForce 8 series in 2006. So instead of having separate, specialized processors for different kinds of tasks, the GPU now had this big pool of flexible, identical cores that could handle anything you threw at them. It just made the GPU way more efficient and adaptable.
Now, this might sound like a small technical change, but its implication was absolutely enormous. The GPU was no longer just a graphics pipeline. It was now a massively parallel supercomputer on a card, just packed with hundreds of these small, efficient cores that were perfect for running the same calculation on huge amounts of data all at once.
And NVIDIA's CUDA platform, released in 2006, was really the key that unlocked all this new potential. For the first time, scientists could easily use GPUs to simulate complex things like protein folding, and financial analysts could run these incredibly sophisticated risk models at unbelievable speeds. This was the birth of general-purpose GPU computing, and it was the spark that really kickstarted the modern AI revolution.
And that brings us to today, where all that parallel processing power, which was originally developed just for gaming, is now being used to create images that are almost impossible to tell apart from reality.
NVIDIA's RTX series brought a technique that used to be reserved for Hollywood blockbusters right to our desktops: real-time ray tracing. Instead of just faking how light works with clever programming tricks, ray tracing simulates how light actually behaves in the real world, tracing the path of individual virtual photons. I mean, just look at the comparison here. The difference is night and day. The ray-traced image on the right has these physically accurate reflections and soft natural shadows. It just creates a much more immersive and believable scene.
But ray tracing is incredibly demanding, so how do they make it work in real time? Well, the secret weapon is AI. Technologies like NVIDIA's DLSS use dedicated AI processors on the card. The GPU renders the game at a lower resolution, and then the AI comes in and, like a master artist, intelligently fills in all the missing details to create a sharp, high-quality final image. The result? You get these stunning visuals with a huge performance boost.
So let's just pause for a second. In about 40 years, we've gone from drawing simple text on a screen to building AI-powered digital universes. The GPU's evolution has been nothing short of astonishing. But what's the next frontier?
The lines are blurring. The CPU, which is kind of the brain of the operation, and the GPU, the parallel processing muscle, they're starting to come together. The future is looking like fusion, a single, incredibly powerful, and efficient chip where both types of cores work together in perfect harmony, sharing memory and tackling tasks as a team.
The GPU has totally outgrown its gaming origins. It's become a fundamental tool for progress. It's helping us model our climate, discover new medicines, and build smarter and smarter AI. As these digital worlds become ever more realistic simulations of our own, the question isn't just what we can create anymore, it's what we can discover.